They shared my prison cell, then the Empire called them queens. The cold walls of Bastion 9 felt like the inside of a machine, sterile and indifferent. It was a prison for the forgotten, a place where even the guards forgot the prisoners' names after a while. The echo of footsteps in the long, dark hallways sounded hollow, as if the building itself was empty, though it was full of souls doomed to fade into history. Marcus Vale stood in the narrow hallway, staring at the number on the door. 12R, a simple number, yet it held a promise. He had been convicted of sabotage, nothing extraordinary, really, in a galaxy where all sides played dirty. But for Marcus, it had been a matter of principle. He didn't care much about the Empire or any of the larger powers. He simply wanted freedom to think, to breathe, and to make his own decisions, away from the Empire's manipulation. He pushed open the door and stepped inside, the harsh light above flickering for a moment before steadying. The room was small, with bare walls, a metal cot bolted to the floor, and a tiny sink in the corner. It smelled of antiseptic, cold metal, and the damp air of an overcrowded station, the kind of air that left you feeling suffocated. As Marcus stood there, the door to the adjoining cell opened, and two women walked in. He could see the weariness in their eyes, the kind of tiredness that spoke of years spent in a place like this. But it wasn't just physical exhaustion. There was something deeper. Something that suggested they knew more than they let on. They didn't speak at first. The older one, with dark brown hair and sharp features, studied him intently. The other, much younger, with fiery red hair and a defiant gaze, simply ignored him, moving to the far corner of the room to sit. "Name, Essa," the older woman said quietly, her voice steady but carrying an undertone of something else, something that Marcus couldn't quite place. "Saren," the younger one said without looking up, her voice sharper, more direct. She was the kind of person who didn't care what others thought. There was power in that, Marcus thought. He respected it. He sat down on the cot, feeling the cool metal beneath him. "Marcus," he replied, his voice low, but not as defeated as he might have sounded a few months ago. He had been sent here for sabotage, one of the many crimes people were locked away for. He had assumed the women were here for the same reason, some kind of political charge, but there was something about them that made him think otherwise. "I haven't seen you around here before," Asha said, her eyes narrowing slightly. "You knew?" "Yeah," Marcus answered, shrugging. "What's the deal with this place?" Asha paused for a moment, as if considering how much she wanted to reveal. Then she spoke, her words careful. "Bastion 9 isn't just a prison, it's something else. A place where the Empire forgets about its mistakes and its secrets." "Secrets?" Marcus asked, raising an eyebrow. He was getting curious now. If there was one thing Marcus liked, it was the chance to dig into something hidden. Asha nodded slowly, her gaze shifting to Saren. "They call us prisoners, but we aren't really here for what they say we are." Saren didn't look up. "We're more useful here than anywhere else," she muttered, her voice almost a whisper, as if speaking too loudly might ruin whatever it was they were involved in. Marcus leaned forward, suddenly feeling more awake than he had since arriving. He wasn't sure what they meant, but he knew one thing: this wasn't just a simple prison, and that made it all the more dangerous. The door to the cell slid open again, this time with the unmistakable clang of an officer's boots. Warden Cord entered the room, his face as expressionless as ever. His uniform was perfectly pressed, the insignia of the Empire gleaming on his shoulder. The man looked like he belonged to a different world, a world of order and strict protocol, the kind that didn't tolerate the kind of mess that people like Marcus caused. Well, what do we have here?" Cord said, his voice smooth, as if he were greeting old friends. "3 new faces in my most private ward. Quite a coincidence." Marcus didn't answer. He wasn't sure what Cord wanted, but he knew better than to speak before he knew the rules of the game. Cord's gaze lingered on the 2 women for a moment before turning back to Marcus. "You're not like the others, are you?" he asked, though it wasn't really a question. He already knew the answer. Everyone here was some kind of pawn. Even the warden was just a piece in a much larger game. Asha, however, met Cord's gaze without flinching. "I'm not interested in your games, Cord," Cord chuckled lightly. "Games? No, this is not a game, Asha. This is the Empire's doing, and you 3 are going to play your part in it." Marcus watched them both. It was obvious that Cord was used to controlling people. But there was something about these women, something unyielding that he couldn't quite grasp. They weren't ordinary prisoners. There was an unspoken power between them, and Marcus was starting to suspect that he had just walked into something much larger than he realized. I'm afraid I'm going to have to ask you to keep it down, Warden, Asha said, her voice unwavering. You might find that some things around here don't go the way you think. Cord's smile faded slightly, but he didn't show any sign of anger. Instead, he turned to leave. We'll see about that, he said over his shoulder. The Empire doesn't take kindly to the disobedient. As the door slid shut behind him, there was a silence that settled into the room, heavy with uncertainty. What was that about? Marcus finally asked, his curiosity gnawing at him. Saren looked up at him, her eyes flashing with a hint of something dangerous. The Empire doesn't make mistakes, Marcus. They know exactly what they're doing, but sometimes things don't go as planned. Sometimes the Lattice doesn't choose the people they expect it to. Marcus frowned, trying to make sense of it. The Lattice, Asha spoke again, her voice low but filled with a strange kind of certainty. The Lattice is more than just a system, it's the Empire's power. And if you can somehow make it work for you, well, then you can be more than just a prisoner. You can be something else entirely. Marcus felt a chill run through him. This was more than just a political maneuver. This was about control, real control. The kind that came from something beyond military power or weapons. So you're saying that the Lattice is what gives the Empire its strength? Marcus asked slowly. Not just that, Asha replied, her gaze distant, as if she were looking far beyond the walls of the cell. It chooses rulers, it chooses power, and it chooses the people who will stand at the top of the Empire. And sometimes it chooses people who shouldn't be chosen. Marcus sat back, his mind racing. What could the Lattice do that could change everything? What was he walking into? Just then there was a hum that filled the room, the faint sound of machinery coming to life. The walls vibrated for a moment, and then with a strange certainty, a single word flashed across the ceiling in glowing Imperial script. Recognized. Asha and Saren both froze, their expressions unreadable. What's that? Marcus asked, his heart suddenly pounding. Asha's eyes widened. It's happening. Saren stood up slowly, her gaze fixed on the walls. We're being watched. Asha's voice was firm as she spoke, her words carrying the weight of something that had been planned for a long time. We're not here by mistake, Marcus, and neither are you. Marcus felt the walls closing in, but it wasn't fear that gripped him. It was something else. Something deeper. And for the first time since he'd been thrown into this prison, he realized that his place in this galaxy might be more important than he could have ever imagined. The atmosphere inside the small, dimly lit cell felt thicker now, almost as if the walls were pressing in, responding to the unseen forces that seemed to shape the prison's very foundation. The hum from the lattice still lingered in the air, a subtle, almost inaudible sound that felt like it was everywhere at once. Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that something was happening, something big, and he was no longer just a passive observer. Asha and Saren stood near the corner of the room, their eyes locked on the walls. They didn't need to speak. It was clear they both felt it too. The lattice, the system that governed the Empire's entire structure, was reacting, but not in a way anyone could understand fully. It was as if the very heart of the Empire had acknowledged something it wasn't meant to. Marcus tried to focus on his breath, to clear his mind, but the weight of the situation kept pulling him back. "Are you two going to tell me what's going on?" he finally asked, his voice steady but with an edge of curiosity. Asha turned towards him, her face expressionless but her eyes alive with something he couldn't quite place. "We weren't supposed to be here," she said quietly. "Neither of us. The lattice wasn't supposed to pick us, but it did, and now it's picked you." Marcus furrowed his brow. "Picked me?" He wasn't sure if she meant it in some metaphorical way or if the lattice had actually chosen him in some grand, cosmic sense. Saren, who had been standing silently near the window, finally spoke up. "The lattice doesn't just pick anyone. It's a system, a way of deciding who is worthy of power, who gets to sit at the top." She paused, letting the weight of her words settle in the room. "And it doesn't like being challenged." Marcus felt the weight of her gaze on him, the implications of her words sinking in. If the lattice had chosen them and him, then they were no longer ordinary prisoners. They were something else entirely. But what was it that made them worthy? And why had the lattice chosen a sabotage engineer like him, someone who had been nothing more than a cog in a much larger rebellion? "We don't know why it chose you," Asha said, reading his thoughts. "But we know why it chose us. Or at least we think we do." Her voice was low, almost as if she were speaking to herself. "We were the forgotten," Saren added, "the ones who were supposed to remain hidden. Erased from history, erased from memory." She walked towards the center of the cell, her fingers brushing the cool surface of the metal table in the middle. "We're more than just survivors. We're heirs to something bigger than this." Marcus looked between them, confused and intrigued. "Heirs to what?" Asha hesitated, then met his gaze. "To the old order, to the true rulers of the Empire, not the ones the Lattice has chosen for years, the ones it was meant to protect." Marcus' mind raced as he tried to piece together what they were saying. He had never heard anything like this before. The Empire had always been an iron fist, a machine that crushed anyone who didn't fit the narrative. He had been part of the rebellion, a small player in the grand scheme of things. But now, standing in this strange, oppressive room with these two women, it felt like the rules of the game were changing, and he wasn't sure if he was ready for it. Before he could respond, the door to the cell slid open once again, and this time Warden Cord walked in, his expression colder than before. He didn't bother with pleasantries, didn't even glance at Marcus. His eyes were fixed firmly on Asha and Saren. "Do you know why you're still alive?" Cord asked, his voice tight with something that bordered on frustration. Asha didn't flinch. "Because you're not the ones who decide anymore," she said calmly. Cord's lips curled into a thin, humorless smile. "Oh, we decide plenty. But the Lattice, that's a different story." He stepped forward, his hands clasped behind his back. "You three are part of a much larger plan. The Empire is moving forward with its goals, and you're going to play your part." Marcus felt a chill crawl up his spine. The way Cord spoke made it clear that this wasn't just about a rebellion or some failed political system. This was about control, real control. And these two women and now Marcus were somehow at the center of it all. Asha's expression softened, but her eyes remained sharp. "What if we don't want to play that part?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper yet filled with defiance. Cord's smile vanished. "You don't have a choice," he said. "None of you do. The Empire does not tolerate disobedience. It never has." Saren stepped forward, her gaze unwavering. "The Empire is built on lies," she said, her voice strong. "And the Lattice doesn't pick the right people. It picks those who will follow its commands without question. But not us, not anymore." Cord's eyes narrowed, but he didn't respond immediately. Instead, he turned his back on them and walked toward the door. "You'll learn your place soon enough," he said, his voice distant. "Just remember, when the time comes, you will serve the Empire, or you will be erased." With that, he left the room, the door sliding shut behind him with a finality that echoed in the silence that followed. Marcus stood in the middle of the room, his mind a whirlwind of thoughts. He didn't know what to believe anymore. He had always thought of the Empire as a faceless, impersonal entity, a machine that crushed anyone in its path. But now, standing here, he realized that the Empire wasn't just a system. It was a system that could be bent, that could be broken. And if these two women, these queens, were right, then it was up to them to rewrite the rules. For a moment, the cell seemed to close in around them. The hum of the lattice grew louder, almost as if it were watching them. The walls felt closer now, tighter, more suffocating. But there was something else, too, a sense of anticipation. Something was about to change, and Marcus didn't know if he was ready for it. "We're not done here," Asha said, breaking the silence. Her voice was quiet but filled with determination. "Not by a long shot." Saren nodded in agreement. "The Lattice may have chosen us, but it doesn't own us, and it certainly doesn't own you." Marcus looked at them, his thoughts racing. "So what now?" Asha's eyes glinted with something like hope, or maybe defiance. "Now we make sure the Empire doesn't get what it wants." Marcus wasn't sure what exactly that meant, but he knew one thing for certain. He had just stepped into something much bigger than he could have ever imagined. And whatever came next, it would change everything. The Lattice had made a mistake by picking them. And now Marcus was ready to find out how deep that mistake ran. The cold, metallic hum of Bastion 9 never stopped. It was as if the prison itself never slept, its walls, its floors, its systems, always awake, always watching. But the feeling inside the cell had changed since Marcus had first arrived. It wasn't just the oppressive silence, nor the strange hum that seemed to pulse through the air. There was something else, an invisible weight pressing down, an anticipation that hung in the air like smoke. Marcus sat on his cot, his eyes fixed on the small table in the middle of the room, his fingers tapping a quiet rhythm. Asha and Saren were across from him, both lost in their own thoughts. Neither spoke, and the quiet was thick, almost suffocating. He could feel the tension between them, the sense that they were waiting for something. But what? After a long pause, Asha looked up from her seat. Her expression was unreadable, but her eyes held something. A fire, perhaps. "Do you know what you've become part of, Marcus?" she asked, her voice quiet but firm. Marcus met her gaze. "No, but I'm starting to get the feeling it's more than I signed up for." Saren, who had been staring out of the small window, turned her head slightly. "The Empire has a plan, and we are the last pieces they never expected. The Lattice chose us, but it's not about us. It's about what comes next." Marcus frowned. "What's coming next?" Asha leaned forward, her voice dropping lower. "The Empire is built on lies, Marcus. Everything it does, everything it controls, is based on a system of manipulation. The Lattice was never meant to be a tool of the Empire. It was meant to be something else, something better." "Better?" Marcus asked, his curiosity piqued. He didn't understand. The Lattice was the backbone of the Empire, the system that decided who ruled and who obeyed. How could it be something better? Saren stood up and walked over to the wall, pressing her hand against the cold surface. "We're not the first to try to break free. There were others before us, people who saw the Lattice for what it truly was, but they didn't succeed. The Empire crushed them, erased them from history." Marcus felt his stomach twist. He had heard stories about the Empire's cruelty, but hearing it this close, in the quiet confines of their prison cell, made it feel more real. "So why do you think we can succeed?" he asked, his voice low. Asha's eyes softened just for a moment. "Because we have something the Empire doesn't understand, something they can't control." Saren turned, her expression fierce. "We have the truth. The Lattice chose us, but it wasn't supposed to. We're the wild card in their game." Marcus stood up slowly, the weight of her words sinking in. "And what does that mean for us?" "It means," Asha began, her tone heavy with determination, "that we have a chance to turn this system on its head, but only if we're willing to risk everything." Marcus felt a chill creep over him. Risk everything. It was a phrase that carried so much weight. The kind of weight that crushed people under its force, the kind of risk that could end in nothing more than silence. But there was something about Asha and Saren that made him believe they weren't just talking about empty words. They were talking about a plan, a real chance. And somehow he was part of it. The door to their cell slid open once again, and this time it was Cord who entered. It was someone Marcus hadn't seen before. The man was tall, dressed in a black, high-collared uniform that marked him as a high-ranking official in the Empire. His eyes were sharp, calculating, and he held a small data pad in his hands, studying it as if it contained the secrets of the universe. "Ah," the man said, looking up as he stepped into the room. "The prisoners, the ones who have caused all this commotion." Marcus didn't recognize him, but the way he carried himself made it clear that he wasn't just some lowly guard. This man was important. "Who are you?" Asha asked, her voice calm, though there was an edge to it. The man smiled slightly, though there was no warmth in it. "My name is Commander Drax. I've been assigned to ensure that you three are dealt with properly." "Dealt with?" Saren echoed, a challenge in her voice. "You're going to try to stop us?" Drax's smile grew, but it wasn't friendly. "I'm not here to stop you. I'm here to ensure that the Empire doesn't have to deal with the mess you've made." He stepped forward, his eyes never leaving Asha or Saren. "The Lattice is a tool of control. It's not meant to be used by people like you. And if you think that somehow you're going to change the course of the Empire, you're wrong." Marcus stepped forward, his fists clenched at his sides. "And what if we don't care about the Empire's plans?" he said, his voice stronger than he felt. "What if we want to tear down everything the Empire stands for?" Drax's eyes narrowed, his expression shifting for the first time. "That's exactly what I'm here to prevent. You three have caused enough damage already. The Empire can't afford to let you continue." Asha stood up slowly, her posture relaxed but unyielding. "You think you can stop us? The Empire is already crumbling. It's not what it used to be, and you're too blind to see it." Drax's lips curled into a tight smile. "The Empire will endure no matter what you do. It's bigger than any one person, any one group of rebels." He paused, his voice lowering. "But you don't understand the Lattice, do you? You think it's some tool of the Empire, but you're wrong. The Lattice decides who deserves power, and it's not you." The room fell silent for a moment, the weight of his words hanging in the air. Marcus couldn't help but feel a sense of dread, but it wasn't enough to deter him. The Empire had always relied on fear. That was the reason they were able to control so many. But fear wasn't enough to control people like Asha, Saren, and him. They were willing to fight for something better. "We'll see about that," Saren said, her voice sharp. You may think you can control everything, but you don't have the truth. The lattice chose us, not you. Drax's expression darkened. It's not the lattice that will be your downfall, he said. It's the fact that you dare to defy it. With that, he turned and left the room, the door sliding shut behind him with a final click. The room felt colder now, the silence more oppressive than before. But it wasn't fear that gripped Marcus. It was something else, something that burned deeper. Asha and Saren exchanged a look, then turned to Marcus. We're going to change the Empire, Asha said softly. And it begins with you. Marcus felt a surge of resolve build inside him. This was no longer just about surviving. This was about something bigger. And he wasn't about to back down now. The cold silence that followed Commander Drax's departure lingered in the room, filling the air with a tense anticipation. Marcus stood by the small table in the center of the cell, his mind racing. There was something about Drax's words that unsettled him, something about the way the commander had spoken with such certainty. But despite the unease creeping into his thoughts, Marcus couldn't deny the fire that had been ignited in him. The Empire had been built on control, on manipulation, on fear. But Asha and Saren were right. The Empire was already cracking, and if they could figure out how to break it apart, then they had a chance to change everything. Saren moved to the window, her gaze distant as she stared out into the emptiness of space. She had been quiet ever since Drax left, her mind clearly elsewhere. Asha was the opposite. Her eyes were sharp, focused, as if she was already planning their next move. We can't waste time, Asha said, her voice calm but filled with urgency. The longer we stay here, the more time the Empire has to silence us. Marcus turned to face her. You think we can really take them down? The lattice, the Empire? Asha didn't flinch. The lattice isn't as invincible as they think it is. It was never meant to be a tool of control. It was meant to connect the galaxy, to guide it, to make sure that everyone had a voice. But somewhere along the way, the Empire hijacked it, and now it's our turn to take it back. Saren finally spoke, her voice soft but filled with determination. The lattice chose us. We're not just prisoners anymore. We're the key, and if we can get to the heart of it, then we can change everything. Marcus didn't know what to say at first. He had been just a pawn in the Empire's game, nothing more than a prisoner, someone who had been thrown away and forgotten. But now, he was part of something bigger. He had been chosen for a reason, and that reason was becoming clearer with each passing moment. How do we get to the heart of the lattice? He asked, his voice steady, his resolve growing. Asha stepped closer, her expression serious. We need access to the central node. It's located in the capital on the main station, but it's heavily guarded. We'll have to move fast and we'll need a plan. Saren nodded, her expression unwavering. We have to outsmart them. The Empire is good at controlling, but they're not good at seeing what's right in front of them. They're used to maintaining order, not adapting to change. And change is exactly what we're going to bring. Marcus felt the weight of her words sink in. They were right. The Empire had grown complacent, believing that their control over the lattice was absolute, but that was their mistake. The lattice was not just a tool of power, it was a living, breathing network, and with the right approach, they could turn it against the Empire. We'll need to move quickly, Asha said, breaking the silence. The longer we stay here, the more dangerous it gets. We need to get to the capital and access the central node before the Empire realizes what we're doing. Marcus nodded. All right, but we can't do it alone. We'll need to gather more support. Saren's eyes lit up at the suggestion. Exactly. The Empire thinks they have everyone under control, but they've underestimated us. We'll find people who are willing to fight. There's always someone looking for a way out, someone who wants to see the Empire fall. Asha's gaze softened. We're not just looking for people who want to fight. We're looking for those who believe in something better, people who know the Empire isn't the answer, people who want to see the galaxy free. Marcus felt a spark of hope in his chest. It wasn't just about revenge. It was about creating a future where the Empire's hold on the galaxy was shattered, where the lattice could be used for something good, something that united people instead of tearing them apart. They weren't just fighting for themselves. They were fighting for everyone who had ever been oppressed by the Empire, everyone who had been silenced by its cruelty. Then we move at dawn, Marcus said, his voice resolute. We'll gather what we need, and then we'll make our way to the capital. The Empire won't know what hit them. Asha and Saren both nodded, their faces set with determination. They had a plan, and it was one they believed in. It wasn't going to be easy, they knew that, but they also knew that they couldn't afford to back down, not now. Not when the stakes were so high. As the night stretched on, the trio made their final preparations. They scoured their small cell for anything they could use, anything that might help them escape the prison's walls and begin their journey to the heart of the Empire. They had no time to waste, and the more they could gather, the better their chances would be. By the time the first light of dawn filtered through the small window of their cell, they were ready. They had a plan, and they knew what they had to do. It wasn't just about breaking out of the prison anymore. It was about bringing down the Empire and freeing the galaxy from the shackles of its control. They moved swiftly through the corridors of Bastion 9, their steps silent but purposeful. They knew the guards would be on high alert, but they also knew the prison's layout better than anyone. They had spent weeks studying it, memorizing every corner, every vent, every possible escape route. And now it was time to put that knowledge to use. As they reached the exit, the alarms began to blare. The sound was deafening, but they didn't stop. They couldn't afford to. They had to move faster, harder, smarter. The Empire would be looking for them, but they were already 2 steps ahead. The door to the prison's outer walls slid open, and the cold, harsh wind of space greeted them. The stars were distant, cold, but they felt alive in that moment. It was the first breath of freedom they had had in so long, and it felt like the beginning of something much bigger. "We're not done yet," Saren whispered, her voice filled with a quiet intensity. "But this is the first step. The Empire won't know what hit them." Asha gave her a determined look, and Marcus felt the weight of her words. They weren't just running away. They were making a statement. They were going to tear down the Empire, piece by piece, until nothing remained of its oppressive grip on the galaxy. As they stepped into the open air, the winds of change began to swirl around them. The journey ahead would be difficult, but they knew one thing for certain. They had no intention of failing. The Empire had taken enough from them, from all of them, and now they were going to take it back. The journey from Bastion 9 to the capital was nothing short of chaotic. They had no time to waste. Every minute spent running meant another minute the Empire would use to find them. But Asha, Saren, and Marcus didn't stop. The fire that had been lit in them burned brighter with every passing moment, driving them forward. There was no turning back now. The Empire had taken so much from them, from everyone, and they were going to take it all back. The ship they had hijacked, a small, aging transport, wasn't built for stealth. It creaked and groaned with every turn, and the hum of the engine was uneven. But it was the only ship they had, and it was fast enough to get them to the capital if they could manage to avoid detection. Marcus sat at the controls, his hands steady on the ship's wheel. He wasn't a pilot, but he had learned quickly. The others were in the back, preparing for what was to come. They knew the risks, and they knew they had no other choice. If they didn't reach the capital in time, if they didn't get to the central node of the lattice, then everything they had fought for would be lost. "We'll have to get past the fleet's patrols," Saren said, her voice steady, though her eyes were sharp with focus. "The Empire will be watching the skies. We'll have to time our approach perfectly." Ashan nodded from the back of the ship, where she had been going over the data they had gathered. "The lattice is deeply embedded in the capital station's infrastructure. We can't just break into it without causing a full-scale alert. We'll need to work our way inside and find the central node. Once we have access, we can begin the process of resetting the system." Marcus tightened his grip on the controls. They weren't just breaking into the capital, they were going to change the entire galaxy. The lattice wasn't just a tool of the Empire. It was a tool that could unite the galaxy, that could bring down the Empire's walls, and they were going to use it. As they approached the capital station, the ship's sensors began to buzz. Marcus's eyes flicked to the display and his stomach sank. The patrol ships were closing in. They had to act fast. "Marcus, can you handle the evasive maneuvers?" Asha asked, her voice calm but urgent. "I've got it," he replied, his voice steady. He wasn't sure if he believed it, but there was no time for hesitation. The ship lurched as he pushed the throttle forward, sending it into a sharp turn. The patrol ships were almost upon them, their sensors scanning the surrounding space. Marcus had to think quickly, every second counting. He knew that if they were caught now, the mission would be over before it even began. He flipped a switch on the control panel, activating the ship's jamming system. It wasn't much, but it was enough to scramble the patrol ship's sensors for a few precious moments. He could see them on the radar, their positions flashing red as their systems tried to process the interference. "Hold on," Marcus shouted, pulling the ship into another sharp turn. The stars outside blurred as the ship skidded, narrowly avoiding the patrol ships. The rumble of the engine shook the entire vessel, but they managed to slip past undetected, the capital station now in their sights. Saren let out a breath she didn't realize she had been holding. That was close. Ashad gave a small, relieved smile. Nice work, Marcus. Now let's get inside. The capital station loomed ahead, a massive structure suspended in the emptiness of space. It was a marvel of imperial engineering, a testament to the Empire's power, but to Marcus it felt like a prison. A place where the Lattice's power was held hostage by the Empire's greed and control. As they neared the station, Marcus slowed the ship's approach, carefully maneuvering it toward an unguarded docking bay. The ship's hull scraped against the station's surface as they docked, but the sound was muffled by the ship's insulation. They had made it. They were inside. Let's move, Ashad said, standing up and pulling on her jacket. We don't have much time. Marcus followed them out of the ship, his heart pounding in his chest. The station's corridors were eerily silent, the sound of their footsteps the only noise breaking the stillness. They were inside the heart of the Empire now, and every moment spent here brought them closer to their goal. Ashad led the way, her steps purposeful and quick. She knew the station's layout, how to move through the darkened hallways, where to avoid the cameras, and which doors would lead them closer to the Lattice's core. As they moved deeper into the station, the gravity of their mission began to settle in. This was it. The moment that would decide everything. If they succeeded, the Empire would fall. If they failed, they would be erased from history like so many before them. We're close, Ashad said, glancing over her shoulder. The central node should be just ahead. Saren nodded. Stay focused. This is the moment we've been working for. The tension was palpable as they rounded the corner, finally coming face to face with the entrance to the central node's control room. The door was heavily guarded, but Marcus could see that the guards were distracted, their attention focused elsewhere. On my signal, Ashad whispered. Marcus nodded. He could feel the weight of the moment in his chest, the fear and the excitement blending together. They had come so far, but they still had one last obstacle to overcome. Ashad gave the signal and they moved. The guards never saw them coming. They were in and out of the room within seconds, their movements precise and fluid. Marcus could hardly believe it. They were inside. The central node was a massive array of data terminals, all linked to the lattice. The air in the room was thick with the hum of machines, their power coursing through the walls, through the very fabric of the station. Marcus felt a shiver run down his spine as he stepped forward, his fingers brushing the controls. This is it, he said, his voice barely a whisper. Ashad and Saren stood by his side, watching as he worked quickly, his hands moving over the controls. He could feel the lattice responding to his touch, its presence pulsing through the station like a living entity. He had no idea what would happen next, but he knew one thing for sure. They were about to change everything. Almost there, Marcus said, his voice tight with concentration. The lattice was resisting, fighting against him, but he could feel the cracks forming. They were so close. They could do this. Then, without warning, the door to the control room slammed open. A group of heavily armed guards flooded into the room, weapons raised. The sudden noise was deafening, and for a moment Marcus froze. "Stop right there," one of the guards shouted, but it was too late. Ashad moved faster than Marcus had ever seen, pulling out a small, sleek device and activating it. The room was immediately filled with a blinding flash of light, and when it faded, the guards were all disoriented, their systems scrambled. "Move," Saren shouted, grabbing Marcus by the arm and pulling him toward the central node's core. Ashad was already ahead of them, her hands flying over the controls. "This is it," Ashad said, her voice fierce. "We're taking it back." The air seemed to hum with energy as Marcus watched Ashad work. She was connected to the lattice now, her fingers dancing over the terminal's surface. The system was fighting, but it was too late. The lattice was changing. The Empire's control over the galaxy was about to end. And as the light from the central node blazed brighter than ever before, Marcus felt the weight of the galaxy shift. The lattice was no longer just a tool of power. It was something new, something that would unite the galaxy, not divide it. "We've done it," Ashad whispered, a smile breaking through her stoic expression. Saren nodded, her eyes shining. "This is just the beginning." Marcus stood there, staring at the glowing terminal in front of him. For the first time in a long while, he felt a sense of hope. The Empire's reign was over, the galaxy was free, and they had made it happen.